It was the smell that woke me. Hot tar, sharp, oily, impossible to mistake. I rolled over, glanced at the clock. 3:07 a.m. What kind of crew works at that hour? My gut told me before my brain caught up, something was wrong. I stepped outside barefoot, the night cool against my skin, and stopped cold. A paving crew was working under floodlights at the base of my drive, their machines growling, steam curling in the dark. Fresh asphalt was being laid right over my gravel road, the one I had owned and maintained for decades. No notice. No permission. No sense. My gateposts, thick cedar, sunk in concrete by my own hands, were already splintered, cast aside like trash. The orange survey stakes I'd hammered into place last winter were gone. In their place was a glistening ribbon of blacktop, cutting across my property as if it had always belonged to someone else. A man in a neon vest waved casually at me, like I was just another neighbor checking the work. I didn't wave back. I walked the edge of the mess, every crunch of gravel under my heels fueling a pulse of anger in my throat. My property, my road, taken in the middle of the night. By sunrise, they were gone. Only the stink of tar remained, along with tire tracks from the trucks that had rumbled off toward the main subdivision. On my porch, taped to the door, was a certified letter. I tore it open, scanned the words twice to be sure. Notice of Improvement Assessment, $3,227.45 due within 30 days, levied by the Lakeside Homeowners Association for the purpose of roadway upgrades and beautification. No greeting. No signature. Just an invoice. I sat down heavily, letter trembling in my hand. The HOA had no claim here. None. I had bought this road with cash, straight from the original owner. I had the deed, the survey, the right-of-way agreements, everything neat, clean, ironclad. Yet here it was, a bill for destroying what I had built, shoved into my face like I was just another one of their tenants. I looked back at the road, now an ugly strip of black slicing across my land. Somewhere in the quiet, a bird chirped, absurd against the reek of tar. That's when I decided I wasn't going to fight this the way they expected. I wasn't going to send polite letters or plead at meetings. I'd fought too many battles in development, too many petty bureaucrats with sharpened smiles. No, this one would be different. I folded the invoice, slid it into my desk drawer, and unlocked the fireproof safe beneath. Inside was a folder I hadn't touched in years, deed copies, county plats, and something more valuable than gold in a fight like this, a survey signed and sealed by George Blackwood, 1987. They thought they'd paved over me. What they didn't know was that I had the kind of paperwork that could turn asphalt back into dust. And I intended to use it. When I first bought the land, the realtor had called it a forgotten corner of the county. I saw something else. A house tucked against the tree line, a narrow gravel road winding like a private spine down to the highway, and most importantly, control of that road. Back then, people thought I was foolish to pay extra for just a stretch of dirt. But I wasn't buying dirt. I was buying freedom. I'd spent years in commercial real estate, and I knew the single most dangerous mistake you could make was to depend on someone else's permission for your access. Roads are power. And in 1987, when George Blackwood signed over that deed, I secured mine forever. Over the years, the road became more than property. It was the border of our lives. My wife Elena planted lilacs along the fence line, their blossoms marking spring like a calendar. My daughter Sophia learned to ride her bike there, wobbling from gravel rut to gravel rut until she found her balance. Winters, I'd chain the gate shut against snowmobiles and joyriders. Summers, I kept the gravel topped and the culverts clear, making sure the spring runoff didn't wash us out. It wasn't just a road. It was the rhythm of our life. The subdivision came later. First one house, then 5, then 30. They had their meetings and newsletters, their rules about mailbox heights and which color mulch was acceptable. I didn't join. Why would I? I wasn't part of their covenant, never signed their paperwork, never paid their dues. My road was mine, and I stayed out of their politics. But neighbors talk, and I heard enough. The HOA wasn't content with flower beds and pool hours. They wanted uniformity, control. They wanted every inch of the neighborhood to answer to them, even the pieces that weren't theirs. Especially the pieces that weren't theirs. The first sign of trouble was small. An anonymous note in my mailbox: "Your gravel is lowering property values. Paved to match community standards." I ignored it. A month later, someone painted "private" in white spray across my gate. I scrubbed it off. Then came the certified letter claiming I was out of compliance with neighborhood infrastructure requirements. That one I laughed at. Still, it ate at me. I pulled my file box out more often, flipping through deeds, maps, surveys like a nervous tick. Every document confirmed the same thing: the road was mine. Paid for, recorded, protected. So when I found the county clerk shrugging at me, claiming there were no records on file, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Records don't just disappear. Unless someone wants them to. I pressed her harder, but her eyes slid sideways like she was staring at something just over my shoulder. A stack of files on her desk bore a name I recognized: Ashworth Development Group. That was the first time I said her name out loud. Vivian Ashworth. And from that moment, I knew the road wasn't just a road anymore. It was a battlefield. Vivian Ashworth didn't knock when she came to my door. She didn't need to. She swept onto my porch like she already owned it, clipboard tucked under one arm, smile painted on like it had been rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Mr. Rockwell," she said, voice warm but sharp at the edges. "We're all so pleased to finally welcome you into the Lakeside family." I leaned on the doorframe. I didn't know I'd applied. Her smile didn't flicker. "Well, whether you've formally joined or not, your road is the entryway for half our residents. It reflects on all of us. And frankly, gravel just doesn't meet community standards." There it was. No small talk, no pretense. Just the demand. I told her what I'd told her letters: the road was mine, bought and paid for, with paperwork to prove it. The HOA had no jurisdiction. Vivian listened with the patience of someone waiting for a child to finish lying. Then she tapped her clipboard and said, "We'll revisit this in writing." And with that, she left, high heels clicking down my porch like a gavel. That was only the beginning. Within a week, I started noticing little things. Bright orange citations tucked under my wiper blades when I parked too close to the cul-de-sac. Anonymous complaints filed to the county about unpermitted structures, my garden shed, which had stood untouched for 15 years. Flyers stuffed in neighbors' mailboxes: "Are you paying for his road?" At night, the survey stakes I'd set to mark my boundary disappeared. I set them again the next morning, only to find them gone by evening. One night, I checked my security cameras. Grainy footage showed two figures in hoodies yanking the stakes out like weeds, tossing them into the ditch. I called the county clerk again, pressed harder. She grew defensive, evasive. "Maybe you should work this out with the HOA," she muttered. That's when I realized Vivian's reach went further than her clipboard. By summer, things escalated. I got a letter from a law firm downtown, embossed letterhead, paragraphs of legalese, demanding I cease obstructing community improvements and remit outstanding assessments within 30 days. Attached was a list of shared infrastructure projects, including my own freshly paved driveway. It would have been funny if it wasn't so calculated. Vivian didn't just want my road. She wanted control. And she was good at it, charming at board meetings, ruthless behind closed doors, whispering poison into county offices and neighbors' ears alike. But charm only goes so far. Paper trails last longer. That night, I saved every letter, every flyer, every screenshot of her HOA Facebook posts calling me the selfish holdout. I printed them, slid them into a binder, and labeled it Evidence, Ashworth. Because Vivian may have had her HOA, her lawyers, and her petty army of clipboard enforcers. But I had patience. And patience, backed with paper, wins wars. By the time the second certified letter landed in my mailbox, I knew I couldn't fight Vivian alone. She had a machine behind her, lawyers, county friends, a small army of volunteers who believed every word she dripped from her polished smile. I needed my own crew. Not an HOA board, not a committee. A war room. The first call I made was to Marcus Hale. We'd served together on a few commercial builds back in the 90s, him as site security, me on development. Former Army, tall as a post, eyes that never stopped scanning. Marcus didn't do speeches. He did solutions. When I told him what the HOA had pulled, he chuckled once, low and sharp. Sounds like you need cameras on every corner and a man who knows how to read them. He was in. Next came Rex Mallory, a private investigator I'd hired years ago to sniff out fraud on a subcontractor. Rex lived in the gray areas, court basements, dusty archives, conversations in parking lots where nobody wanted their name on paper. He had the patience of a bloodhound and the stubbornness of a mule. When I mentioned missing county records, his laugh was dry. Records don't vanish, Garrett. Someone hides them. Let me dig. Then there was Dr. Hernandez, our family doctor, yes, but also a man who knew how bureaucracies worked. He'd fought hospital boards, insurance adjusters, even state health officials. Behind his quiet bedside manner was a steel core. He offered to document the stress Vivian's campaign was causing Elena and Sophia. Paper cuts can bleed out a giant, he reminded me. Documentation wins. Janet Kim rounded out the early team. She lived 3 houses down, a widow who'd seen her share of HOA nonsense. A former paralegal, sharp as a tack, she knew how to organize evidence into a story judges could follow. When I explained what was happening, she simply nodded. If they can do it to you, they can do it to all of us. We met in my garage the first time, lawn chairs circled around a folding table, files stacked like bricks. Marcus set up a screen to review camera feeds. Rex slid copies of old deeds and plats across the table, some with handwritten notes scrawled in the margins. Janet had already started color-coding files by subject: harassment, boundary disputes, financial irregularities. Dr. Hernandez sipped coffee and quietly reminded us to track every symptom of stress, every cost, every sleepless night. And then, with a quiet satisfaction, I laid down my ace, a copy of the 1987 Blackwood deed, signed, notarized, stamped. It was the anchor point, the foundation stone none of Vivian's bluster could erase. This, I told them, is where we start. They've paved over paper. We're going to peel it back. That night we made our plan: file a quiet title action to confirm ownership, prepare a federal environmental complaint over wetlands damage, and gather every shred of evidence into a fortress of documentation. Vivian thought she had me cornered. What she didn't see was that I'd just built my own army. Vivian didn't come at us with bulldozers this time. She came with whispers, shadows, and a smile that never reached her eyes. It started small, the way most pressure campaigns do. Anonymous posts on the HOA Facebook page, some people think they're above community standards. Then flyers slipped into mailboxes with grainy photos of my road, stamped in red letters: unsafe, outdated, dangerous. My name wasn't on them, but everyone knew who they meant. Then came the calls. One evening Elena answered the phone, and a syrupy voice asked if she was tired of living next to a stubborn man who endangered children. She hung up, shaken. 2 days later, Sophia came home from school pale-faced. A classmate had repeated something they'd overheard their parents say: maybe your dad should just move if he can't follow the rules. That one stung. Kids should be shielded from this garbage. But Vivian knew where to cut. The harassment grew bolder. My mailbox, once painted a neat forest green, was smashed with a bat. Twice. Someone sprayed weed killer along our lilacs, leaving them wilted and brown. One morning, I found the side of my truck streaked with a line of white paint, deliberate, precise, like a signature. I logged everything. Photos, timestamps, receipts. Every act of vandalism went into Janet's growing binder of evidence. Marcus tightened our security net: more cameras, motion lights, even a drone he flew at odd hours to map who came and went along the road. But even with proof stacking high, the mental toll crept in. Elena grew quiet at dinner. Sophia stopped riding her bike. Sleep became shallow, broken by the crunch of tires outside or the bark of a dog too close to the fence line. Vivian's legal harassment didn't stop, either. Another certified letter claimed our property violated architectural harmony guidelines. This time, they cited our garden shed, a structure older than most of the subdivision itself. Insurance notices arrived, premiums raised mysteriously. A county inspector happened to appear unannounced, measuring our deck for code compliance. Rex followed the paper trail and confirmed what we already suspected. Vivian had friends in the county offices, people willing to shuffle complaints to the top of the pile. The clerk who had shrugged about missing survey records? She'd attended Vivian's fundraiser the month before. Dr. Hernandez kept urging me to log the strain. Judges aren't swayed by feelings, he said. They're swayed by documented harm. Elena finally agreed to keep a stress journal, each entry a quiet testament to what constant siege does to a family. Through it all, Vivian played the part of gracious neighbor in public, waving at cameras, smiling at community events, speaking in calm tones about progress and fairness. But behind the mask was a campaign designed to break us down, inch by inch, until resistance felt heavier than surrender. What she didn't count on was that I'd spent a lifetime dealing with pressure. Developers, inspectors, contractors, I'd seen every trick. And I wasn't going to crack. In fact, every smashed mailbox, every spray of poison, every smug little flyer only hardened my resolve. Because if Vivian wanted war, she was going to learn what it felt like when the other side fought back with patience, paper, and a plan sharp enough to cut steel. Rex called me one afternoon, his voice carrying that rare edge of excitement. "Garrett, you better get down here. Basement of the old courthouse. I found something Vivian couldn't bury." The courthouse smelled like dust and mildew, its archive room stacked with forgotten boxes. Rex stood over a table littered with plats and deeds, his finger planted firmly on a yellowing document. I leaned over and felt my chest tighten. George Blackwood's original 1987 survey. There it was in black ink, the metes and bounds of my property, the road drawn cleanly within my parcel lines, signed and sealed by the county engineer. This wasn't a copy, it was the certified original, the kind you can walk into any courtroom with and watch a judge's gavel fall like thunder. "They tried to hide it," Rex said, sliding another sheet across the table. "But they slipped. See this withdrawal stamp? Someone pulled it from the active file just last year. Guess who signed the request?" I didn't need to guess. At the bottom, in tiny cursive, Vivian Ashworth. The deeper Rex dug, the dirtier it got. Mortgage records tied to Vivian's shell company showed loans secured not by actual assets, but by projected HOA income. She was betting on assessments from residents, including the illegal ones she was trying to stick me with to keep her empire afloat. If the cash stopped flowing, so would her empire. Janet cross-checked financials and nearly whistled. She's leveraged to the teeth. One wrong move and the whole stack collapses. Meanwhile, Marcus traced HOA meeting minutes and caught an odd phrasing, pre-approved permit applications for community roadwork. Pre-approved by whom? We soon learned the answer, Commissioner Morse, a county official who happened to receive regular donations from Vivian's development group. The rubber stamp was hers to wield, and he made sure it hit the ink pad every time. Dr. Hernandez added his layer, environmental impact. With his help, we mapped out every stormwater drain Vivian's crew had altered when they paved. They had rerouted runoff straight into a patch of wetlands. Hernandez took soil samples, photographed erosion, even documented a dead heron tangled in oil-slick reeds. Federal law didn't look kindly on that. Piece by piece, the picture formed. This wasn't just an HOA chairwoman being overzealous. This was fraud, collusion, and environmental crime. That night in the garage, I spread everything across the folding table. The deed. The financials. The permits. The photos. It looked less like a neighborhood dispute and more like the opening argument in a federal case. I watched my crew take it all in, Marcus standing with his arms crossed, Rex grinning like a dog with a bone, Janet's pen flying across her notepad, Hernandez quietly muttering statutes under his breath. Vivian thought she could smear me, bury records, and intimidate my family into silence. What she didn't know was that her empire had cracks, and we'd just found the hammer. For the first time since this began, I felt something more than anger. I felt momentum. The county hearing room was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls, neighbors whispered behind cupped hands, and at the front table, Vivian sat like a queen on her throne. She wore a navy suit, pearls at her throat, and that infuriating smile that said she already owned the outcome. But this time, she didn't. Janet opened with precision. She laid down the deed like a sword on the table, its embossed seal catching the fluorescent light. My client, Mr. Garrett, is the lawful owner of this road. The HOA's claim is not only baseless, it is fraudulent. Gasps rippled through the room. Vivian leaned forward, lips parting in mock surprise. That's a very bold accusation. Bold because it's true, Janet shot back, flipping to the financials Rex and uncovered. This HOA, under Ms. Ashworth's leadership, has leveraged projected assessments against properties it doesn't even control. That's called fraud, ladies and gentlemen. And here's the paper trail to prove it. The room shifted. People who had once nodded at Vivian's every word now fidgeted, eyes darting between her and the growing mountain of evidence. But Vivian didn't flinch. She adjusted her papers and let out a laugh as smooth as silk. Desperate men make desperate claims. Mr. Garrett has been hostile to progress from the beginning. He resists community standards, and now he's spinning conspiracy theories because he doesn't want to pay his fair share. The audience murmured again, this time more divided. Vivian had always been persuasive, and she wielded her charisma like a weapon. That's when Dr. Hernandez stepped up. He wasn't flashy, but his voice carried weight. These aren't theories, he said, laying down his photos of polluted wetlands and the necropsy of the heron. This is environmental crime. Altered storm drains. Illegal runoff. Federal violations. I've submitted my report to the EPA. Silence fell heavy over the room. For the first time, Vivian's composure cracked, just a flicker in her eyes, a tightening in her jawline. But she recovered quickly, turning toward the commissioner's desk. We all know progress requires some inconvenience. Are we going to let one man and his allies stall a project that benefits everyone? Commissioner Morse cleared his throat, visibly sweating. He'd been in Vivian's pocket, but now the spotlight was scorching. If he sided with her too strongly, the crowd, and maybe the feds, would smell blood. Before the gavel could fall, Marcus leaned toward me and whispered, "She's not beaten yet. Watch her back." He was right. That night, as I pulled into my driveway, headlights flared in my rearview. A black SUV idled at the end of the road, no plates visible in the dark. It didn't move until I stepped out with my camera raised. Then it rolled away slow, deliberate, like a warning. Vivian might have lost ground in the hearing, but she wasn't retreating. No, she was changing tactics. And the game was about to turn dangerous. The morning after the hearing, my phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number. "Drop this or your family pays first." I stared at it for a long minute, jaw tight, before showing Elena. She went pale. "Garrett, this isn't just HOA politics anymore. This is criminal." She was right. Vivian had stopped playing the part of polished chairwoman. Now she was leaning on fear. The pressure came fast. My mailbox was torched one night, the charred metal post smoldering when I walked out for the paper. Marcus's drone caught a masked figure slipping into the woods behind my property. Rex's firewall lit up with attempted hacks, probing my accounts for weaknesses. Even Janet's office received an envelope stuffed with black and white photos of her car, her kids, her daily routine, an unsubtle warning to back off. Vivian's smile at public events was still flawless, but behind the scenes, she'd unleashed wolves. Marcus doubled the cameras, overlapping coverage so there wasn't a blind spot left on the property. He even wired motion sensors along the fence line, feeding alerts straight to his tablet. "If they so much as breathe wrong near your yard, we'll know," he said. Dr. Hernandez went quiet for a few days, then came back grim-faced. "The EPA took my report seriously. They've assigned an investigator. But Vivian has reached. I heard she's already trying to muddy the waters, claiming we falsified evidence." Rex, meanwhile, kept digging. He pulled IP addresses from the hacking attempts and traced one back to a firm registered under one of Vivian's shell companies. He slammed his laptop shut and grinned. "She got sloppy. This is admissible in court." But despite the wins, the fear seeped in. Elena refused to let Sophia walk to school alone. "Every night I check the locks twice, scan the cameras, then lay awake listening to phantom footsteps in the gravel. One evening, I came home to find a dead crow nailed to my fence. No note. No message needed. I snapped a photo, bagged it with gloves, and handed it to Marcus for prints. Then I called Janet. We're past legal chess moves, I told her. She's escalating into intimidation. Next step is physical harm." Janet didn't argue. She reached out to a contact in federal law enforcement. If Vivian wanted to play dirty, we'd bring in players who lived in the mud. Still, it ate at me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was my wife, my daughter, my friends. Every escalation risked dragging them deeper into Vivian's storm. And yet, beneath the fear, there was something else simmering in me, something hotter, harder. Resolve. If Vivian thought threats and shadows could drive me off, she'd miscalculated. I wasn't retreating. No, this war had just entered its final stage. And I intended to end it on my terms. By the time the federal subpoena landed on Vivian's desk, the cracks in her empire were too wide to hide. I knew it. She knew it. And yet, she doubled down. The HOA called an emergency community meeting in the clubhouse, the kind of event that usually drew sleepy retirees and free coffee seekers. But this night, the room was packed, buzzing with tension. Neighbors whispered, some angry, some confused, most caught in the undertow of a fight they hadn't asked for. Vivian stood at the podium, voice dripping with false calm. "We're under attack," she said, gesturing toward me in the crowd. "One man has chosen to sabotage progress, to waste your dues on legal theatrics. He would rather see our neighborhood collapse than contribute fairly." Boos and claps clashed in the room. Some residents, her loyalists, nodded, while others glanced my way with sympathy. I rose slowly. My folder was thick with the evidence we gathered, deeds, financial fraud, environmental violations, and the chain of intimidation she'd unleashed. My hands didn't shake when I set it on the table. "This isn't about community standards," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "This is about one woman's greed. I have here the original deed proving this road is mine. I have proof she withdrew it illegally from the county files. I have records of shell companies leveraged against your dues, environmental crimes that risk federal prosecution, and surveillance footage tying her proxies to vandalism and threats." Gasps filled the room. People shifted in their seats, whispers turning into open arguments. Vivian laughed, brittle this time. "He fabricates. He manipulates. But I cut her off. No fabrication. These aren't my words, these are federal subpoenas and EPA reports. I held them high so everyone could see the official seals. Vivian Ashworth isn't protecting this community. She's using it as her personal piggy bank." The room erupted. Residents shouted questions at her, demanding answers, demanding refunds. One man slammed his fist on the table, yelling about his skyrocketing dues. Another woman shouted about the wetlands, about her kids playing near poisoned water. For the first time, Vivian's mask slipped. Her smile wavered, her composure cracked. She tried to shout over the chaos, but her voice was drowned by the tidal wave of outrage. Then, as if on cue, 2 men in plain suits stepped into the back of the room. Federal badges flashed. The timing couldn't have been more poetic. "Vivian Ashworth?" one asked, his tone clipped and cold. "We need to speak with you. Now." The room went dead silent. Vivian's face drained of color. She looked around for allies, but the crowd that once followed her every word now stared at her with betrayal and anger. She tried to stand tall, gathering her papers, but her hands trembled. The agents flanked her, guiding her toward the exit. Each step echoed like the toll of a bell. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just watched, my arms folded, as the queen of the HOA was marched out of her own kingdom. For the first time since this battle began, the road, and my family's peace, felt like it might truly belong to us again. But I knew better than to celebrate too soon. The storm wasn't over. Not yet. The days after Vivian's removal felt strangely quiet, like the air after a hurricane. Neighbors who had once avoided me now waved from their porches, some sheepishly crossing the street to apologize. "We didn't know, Garrett," they'd say. "She fooled us too." I didn't hold grudges. Vivian had been a master manipulator, and fear kept people compliant. I understood that better than anyone. Still, there was damage to undo. The first order of business was reclaiming the road. With Janet's legal filings and the original deed, the county court ruled in my favor within days. The road was mine, untouchable by the HOA. Their attempted seizure was declared void, their assessments illegal. The ruling sent ripples through the subdivision. Without Vivian's iron grip, residents voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. Some cheered, others grumbled, but most seemed relieved to finally be free of endless dues and rules that served only her ambitions. Marcus and I tore down the HOA signs at the road entrance ourselves. Each bolt that clattered to the pavement felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for too long. But restoration wasn't just about property lines. Elena needed peace. For weeks, she'd lived with cameras blinking at every corner, her sleep fractured by fear. One evening, I found her in the garden, replanting lilacs where Vivian's vandals had killed them. "If they can grow back," she said softly, "so can we." Sophia too began to ride her bike again, this time with neighbors' kids trailing behind. The laughter echoing down the road sounded like a victory no courtroom could ever deliver. Rex worked overtime scrubbing my accounts of any digital fingerprints Vivian's people had left. He also unearthed a final gem, Vivian's offshore accounts, now frozen under federal order. The smug grin he wore when he told me was priceless. Dr. Hernandez testified before state officials, ensuring the wetlands Vivian had damaged would be restored. Grants were set aside, cleanup crews scheduled. He told me quietly that Heron didn't die for nothing. Janet became something of a hero in the county legal circle. Her binder of evidence, every photo, every timestamp, every note, was cited as textbook documentation in community law seminars. She just winked and said, "All in a day's work." For me, restoration meant more than reclaiming my road. It meant proving that you can stand your ground when someone tries to steal it out from under you. That even one man, backed by truth and grit, could topple an empire built on intimidation and lies. On the first Saturday after the ruling, I walked the length of the road. No SUVs tailing me. No vandalism waiting at my fence. Just the crunch of gravel under my boots, the hum of cicadas in the trees, and the sight of Elena waving from the porch. For the first time in months, the road felt like home again. And I knew we'd earned it. Months later, the subdivision looked different. Without Vivian's stranglehold, the place softened. Neighbors planted gardens without fear of violation notices. Kids chalked drawings on sidewalks no one dared scrub away. Mailboxes, once required to match in color and height, now stood in cheerful variety, red, blue, even one shaped like a lighthouse. Freedom had returned, in small, quiet ways. The wetlands were healing, too. Where oil-streaked water once pooled, new reeds sprouted. I took Sophia down to the edge one afternoon, and we spotted a pair of herons gliding overhead. She squeezed my hand. "They came back, Dad." I smiled. So did we. Vivian's name vanished from neighborhood conversations. Last I heard, she was fighting her battles in federal courtrooms, her empire crumbling under the weight of her own ambition. Some folks pitied her. I didn't. She made her choices. My road, though, the one she tried to steal, endured. It wasn't just gravel and tar. It was a boundary line, a promise, a reminder that standing your ground matters. That no matter how powerful the opposition, truth has weight. And with patience, persistence, and a few good allies, it can't be buried forever. One evening, as the sun set orange over the pines, Elena and I sat on the porch. The road stretched quiet before us, the air filled with cicadas and the distant bark of a dog. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Do you think it's finally over?" I looked out at the road, steady and unbroken, and nodded. It's over. And this time, it's ours to keep. The road belonged to us again. And it always would.